I was 13 years old, sitting on a sandy beach, when my dad had a major heart attack. It was incredibly frightening. It was back in the 50s. There wasn't a whole lot that they could do in those days.
In the 1950s or 1960s into the 1970s, if you had a heart attack, there were very few medicines that were used, almost no medication. The treatment for a heart attack was 3 weeks of bed rest.
I was out of town, in fact, in Chicago. I left the hotel on foot, headed down Michigan Avenue. I was moving along at a fair clip because that's what I do. And suddenly I noticed this sort of a prickly sensation in my chest. It wasn't terribly painful, and so I continued. And I did some shopping, and then I headed back to the hotel. Once again, the sensation returned to my chest. And I thought, this doesn't seem normal. So I called my daughter Jenny.
Being a nurse, I knew that we had to take this seriously. So I kept trying to talk her into going to the emergency room right then. It had to get looked at because I knew as a nurse, you can't ignore any kind of chest pain.
There was this one wonderful, astute young doctor who said to me, "Is there any family history of heart disease?" And when I shared with him my father's story and the fact that he had had a heart attack at such an early age, they said, "Yes, we're going to keep you. We need to run further tests." And it was discovered that I had an 80% blocked major artery in my LAD. I remember being shocked. I eat well. I've always exercised. I've never smoked. And so I thought I was golden. Not everybody fits that profile of the heart patient, and yet you could have a serious heart problem.
I think she lives life to the fullest. She treasures very special moments with all of us and family time.
Just grabbing hold of life and living it as fully as I can. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association that made such a big difference in my life. Compared to the life that my father lived, the research that's taken place over the years since his heart attack is amazing. I'm still really active. I just did the women's 4-miler, and I still shop till I drop.
January 31st, 2012. So that morning I trekked on down to the gym. Was feeling great, very relaxed, very rested. I started to walk back and got into the locker room, and I was about halfway through. I started to lose my equilibrium. And I started to get nauseous, started to get clammy, and I could feel the prickling of my nerve endings. You know, it was this, it started to become like a wave that was coming over me. And you know, just wondering what in the world was going on with me at that time. I'm thinking about my whole life, my children's life, you know, how this is going to affect my wife and how we're going to carry on from here. Still at this time, it's not registering that I had a stroke.
That Michael suffered what we call a cervical artery dissection, which is a tearing of the lining of the artery wall in the neck. This is a rare cause of stroke, but one that affects upwards of 20% of individuals less than the age of 55.
This thing snuck up and hit me like a brick wall. When we did the CAT scan, they started to see things that maybe a couple of years ago they would not have.
10, 20 years ago, we in all likelihood would not have recognized that as the potential mechanism in his case. We would have been left scratching our heads saying, why did this healthy, relatively young adult have a stroke? The good news is that after his initial treatment, he had a very good recovery.
I'm just absolutely lucky to be alive. I've lost some hearing, and I'm as happy as I can be. I'm just enjoying every single day now to its fullest.
The impact of stroke is a devastating disease. It's just the third or fourth leading killer in this country and one of the leading killers in the world. But the true impact of stroke is on the amount of adults that it leaves disabled for the rest of their lives. Both the cost and quality of life to the patient, the cost and loss of productivity for our society are astounding.
Myself, I'm part of a program right now. Dr. Sutherland is leading it up, and I think he's working with French neurologists to work on exactly what has taken place with me, and they're researching, trying to figure out why.
The understanding the cause of cervical artery dissection as a prevalent cause of stroke in young adults, as in Mr. Kelly's case.
With this funding, we can find out how these problems are originating, get into the root cause, and hopefully to prevent this from happening again in the future.
Folks like me who are early in the field of stroke care and stroke research would not be able to investigate these new areas without the support of the American Heart, American Stroke Association.
The research that we're doing that's funded by the American Heart Association is trying to find predictors of decline in heart function in patients who have received chemotherapy. It's tragic enough for a patient to develop cancer, and the chemotherapy that cured their cancer causes terrible heart damage to the point they have heart failure. And if they're cured of cancer, we want to prevent the development of heart damage from the chemotherapy. If we can do that, then that would tell doctors, hey, wait, we need to stop and go to a different chemotherapeutic agent. The study that we're doing at the University of Virginia is using MRI and this particular test looking for heart damage after chemotherapy. It's still in the area of research, but we're hoping that we develop this test to the point that it can be used in other centers around the world for the patient who's had this type of chemotherapy to prevent the onset of heart damage down the road.
Without donations, research doesn't happen, and without research, changes don't happen. And so the more you can give, the more change we can make, and that's really can potentially affect every person out there.